Hey, Mark, how are you?
How are you?
Pretty good. Get a light on here so you can see. Lexi says hi.
Hi, Lexi.
Look, Mark saying hi. Where's Buddy?
Sitting on the bed about 3 feet from my feet.
Uh-huh. Look at this. Rub my tummy.
Aw.
Give a kiss. Give a kiss. Thank you. I'll be right back. I'm going to get a drink.
Awesome.
So I used Michael's challah to make French toast this morning. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
I had to ask, texted Joyce and said, okay, I need your recipe. And she called me and I was like, well, that was fast. But I figure if I get a recipe from her, I can't go too wrong. So she's like, I don't have a recipe. And I said, well, just tell me what you put in it and then I can go from there. So it wound up pretty decent. I haven't made French toast in probably 3 or 4 years. So not bad for a first try. Are you okay over there? Hey. Lexi. How's your weekend been?
All right. Not bad.
Anything?
Gail's having a hard time getting in, so I'm trying to help her.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Here, Lexi. It's amazing how big.
It's quite a view.
Uh-huh. Hey, I could be more full on. Hello. She's crazy. All right. Somebody's feeling a little better, I think.
Yes. Good, good, good. Hello, Elise, and I apologize. How is North Carolina?
North Carolina. Yay.
Woo!
It's cold here today. I
Is
just
it?
posted them on the Facebook page.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
I totally forgot.
I forgot.
I know, but I forgot to remind you.
Yeah, there you go.
I wish there was a way I could post them on here, but there isn't. I tried.
Yeah.
Like I tried to see if I can,
Are you talking about the
think you need,
notes?
hold on. I think I need to make you a co-host to do that. Let me see if
Oh,
that'll
okay,
work.
do that, and then I can post it in case people,
Let me see if I can do that.
I promise I won't abuse my privileges.
Well, I'm in now.
Hey, Gail.
Yeah, but it wasn't work. I couldn't get in with the CBS link.
All right. So
That's fine.
Elise, you're now the host, but it means I'm no longer the host. So see if you can get everything up there.
Okay.
But I don't know if I can mute everybody. Let me see if that works
Gail.
here. No, I can't. Yeah.
All right.
I don't know how to make myself. Can you make me co-host?
Participants. No. And I don't even see a way to put it on there either. So
All right. So make me
Okay.
host then. Make me host again, and we'll go from there.
how do I do that?
Go at the top. There's where it says more.
Yeah,
All right, let me see.
Oh,
if I
here you
can
go.
do it.
I got it. Oh, come on.
Lexi. What are you doing?
Yeah, I got it. Okay.
You did it?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Oh,
Good morning, everybody. I'm glad you got in, Gail.
Yeah,
I'll put the link on to Facebook so that people can go there faster, maybe.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Lexi.
And I'll get it out fast.
thank you.
Well, if you were in the from the Boca Tove, you should have access to the materials.
Yeah, I have the materials, but it wouldn't
Okay.
take the passcode.
Okay. I don't know what to tell you. All I can say is don't stress about it.
No, I'm okay now.
It didn't take prayers.
No, it didn't. It kept
It did
saying
for me.
incorrect passcode.
I just
Excuse
clicked
me.
the link and it came up.
Did you do a capital P for the prayers?
Yeah, I
Because
think.
that's what I did. I got in right away.
All right, well, I
maybe-
just,
Me too. Me
so
too.
Gail, I sent you the link. Put
I
that
got
into, put it into your calendar
all right.
for every Sunday, and you won't have to do anything other than click on it.
Except the next 2
Maybe-
weeks.
You know what? Maybe I hit the caps lock by mistake. I don't know.
Okay, but if you create the links in your calendar, you never have to enter any of the data again.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Gail, it's Gloria.
Morning
Hi,
all.
Gloria, how are you?
Okay, happy, healthy new year to you.
Oh, you too. I hope 2021 is a good year for all.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
A healthy year.
Yeah,
Yes,
we're
definite one.
kicking off the roaring 20s.
Right.
So
Let me-
what's the, hey Gina, what's the new dance?
I was saying, do we have to dress like flappers?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one.
But I don't know any of the flapper dances, so
How's the dog?
she's right here.
Hi, Lexi. Oh, she looks good today.
No, she's drugged, so. Are you feeling good?
Oh,
I think she's okay. She's just chilling out.
We'll give people another minute or two, we'll get started. So the
Thank you
materials
for the
got
documents.
posted, the materials got posted on Facebook late. It is my fault, not Elise's. Please, and I appreciate everything you do. It's amazing. So I take responsibility and I apologize. But they are there now.
is that
And it's,
the protest intoleration?
yes.
They were there. They were in the Boker Tov. That's the,
Yeah.
Right, but there's two places they get posted. There's the
Oh,
Boker
okay.
Tov, and only members get that, Gail. That's the problem.
oh, okay.
So we posted in Facebook as well for those who don't have access through the Boker Tov.
So another happy class.
Yeah, I aim to please. And today we'll be about halfway through the joy.
And the year.
Mark, it's a tribute that I watch the Houston Texans after this to cheer up.
That's tragic.
Yeah.
They're trying to get people to sign up for season's tickets to be on the waiting list. I have a feeling a lot of people are dropping out.
I think they're going to be the one who does the waiting to see people.
Yeah.
come on the-
It's not that long ago, because I bought a ticket for the Astros during the time that they were bad, that I got a call from the team and invited to do a tour of the stadium when it was empty at one point. They were begging for people to come.
I think we should call it
You
the
got-
depressing 20s.
Mark, did you
You're
go?
helping set the mood.
Well, I'm not looking forward to 2030.
Mark, did you go?
Why?
I am.
2021.
I hope I do, yeah.
Yeah, let's gather for 2030. What are you talking about?
All right.
Hey,
Right.
Just around the corner, I'd kind of start thinking about party decorations.
There you go.
Sandy, please thank Leslie for me for the lovely card.
will do. Will do.
I have an interesting poem called What If 2020 Isn't Canceled?
Right.
Isn't.
We may-
So
go
may
on.
the 20s be roaring, and may the 30s be better than the 1930s.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
hope it's not a Groundhog Day.
Yes. All right. Welcome, everybody. Glad you're here with
Levine in
us.
Texas.
I'm going to mute everyone. And we'll
I'm
get
starting my
started.
class with Cantor Levine in Texas. It's on anti-Semitism, the history.
Wow.
All right, here we go. So we left off with the reading last week about the Inquisition in Spain. And we also have the expulsion. The question is, where do the Jews go from this point? They're forced out of Spain, And other countries have already had expulsion. So they can't go to France, they can't go to England, they can't go to Germany, they can't go to Hungary, and they can't go to Lithuania. So where do they go? Majority of Jews at this point, there's three general areas that they're going. Poland, this is the beginning of the Polish Jewish world. You have the Muslim countries, okay? And a great majority of those who left in 1492 initially head to Portugal. That's their initial stop. King John, of Portugal, makes them pay for the privilege of settling in Spain. So they're not allowed to take most of their possessions, and they're paying that to the king. 1492, approximately 100,000 Jews head to Portugal. 1497, 5 years later, John's successor, Manuel I, then decrees all Jews have to convert or leave Portugal. Right, 5 years after they paid to get in. What is the reason for this break into policy? He wants to marry the daughter of Isabel and Ferdinand to sort of consolidate the power. They insist, you want to marry our daughter, get rid of your Jews. All right. There's massacres in 2000. 2,000 individuals in 1506 are massacred in Lisbon, and by 1536, an Inquisition is established in Portugal as well. So now the Iberian Peninsula is essentially free of openly identifying Jews. They have an auto de fe in Portugal as well, and things obviously don't go well. So most of the Jews are going to Italy, Poland, and the Muslim Empire. The Ottoman Empire. At this point, that's where we're going to find most of the Jews. Constantinople, which is now Istanbul, was the home to about 50,000 Jews. All right, and some Jews at this point also head out to Israel. Right, this is when you start to see in Spot. The mystics, in the world of the mystics. Another group made a different journey in 1492. You may have heard of them. One of them kept a diary. His Christian name, he converted 3 days before he left, was Luis de Torres. And he accompanies Columbus on his ships. And today he was brought because he was a translator. Remember, Columbus expected to be arriving in the Indies. He also expected to find the 10 lost tribes. Guess what they didn't find? He found tribes, but I don't think they were Jewish. Okay. Nonetheless, they stumble upon two new continents, and in Freeport in the Bahamas, there is a Luis de Torres synagogue. All right, that's where I'm going to leave that. I'm just finishing up last week, and now I'm going to start with this week's material. All right, let's look at Western Europe in the 1500s. It is very different from the world that they had experienced 50 years prior. Some of those changes result as the discovery of the new land. Others seem less dramatic, but in certain ways are far more impactful. One of those is the Gutenberg printing press in 1440. All right. Before this point, every book was handwritten. It could take months. It could take years to complete. I mean, you didn't walk into a synagogue and find Chumashim and Sidurim. And for that reason alone, I'm sure that's where the repetition of the Amidah came from. People didn't know the text. So how do you fulfill your obligation? Somebody reads it, and at the end of each blessing, you say Amen, and therefore you're chovah. You are fulfilled of the obligation to recite the Amidah. You didn't have the text of, as I say to the kids when I hand them a chumash in class, and I mention Rashi. Imagine the brilliance of a Rashi when he says this word in Isaiah means this, because when I saw it in I don't know, say Genesis, this is what it meant. This is not a man who had a chumash sitting in front of him. Okay, there's a brilliance to that. Today, we don't even need to use the Chumash. We look it up online and say, where else does this word appear? It's much different world. But the printing press enabled, and it changed, and you're going to see the impact on Jewish life as a result of the printing press. The printing press leads to an explosion of knowledge and encourages the growth of a movement known as humanism. Almost everywhere in the 16th century, humanism centers on a rediscovery of the great writers of Rome and Greece. For centuries, these texts had been studied by the Muslims. Now they're being rediscovered by Christians who find the ideas within them very relevant to their lives. Almost all humanists during this time were devout Christians, and many of them saw no contradiction between their interest in humanity and their religious beliefs. And so what it enabled was a new lens in looking at religious books. They would go back and reread them with new insights. What is new to the world in terms of Judaism is some of the Christians begin to believe one could study Jewish texts and still be a true Christian. They weren't going to lead you astray. Some believe this. Today, it seems obvious. It was radical. It was revolutionary in its time. Nonetheless, most Christians believed that Hebrew books were so dangerous that they had to be destroyed. Among such Christians was a recent convert from Judaism to Christianity by the name of Johannes Pfefferkorn, P.F., Pfefferkorn. In 1509, with the help of Dominican friars, Pfefferkorn persuades Maximilian I, the Holy Roman Emperor, to confiscate and burn all Jewish books. That's Pfefferkorn's position. Jews turn to Maximilian, all right, to say, would you reconsider this? And he then turns to another Christian scholar and humanist by the name of Reuchlin, R-E-U-C-H-L-I-N. Reuchlin recommends preserving the Hebrew books. So you've got Pfefferkorn trying to get rid of everything. You've got Reuchlin, who are they're Christian scholars, saying preserve them. Now, what's Reuchlin's motivation? He's certainly not trying to become a Jew. He says that the Jewish Bible and Jewish texts can serve as proofs of Jesus. Okay. Second, he also questions the right, since all are citizens of the Holy Roman Empire, how can you take away these rights of other citizens? It's a modern thinker for sure. And he persuades Maximilian to return the books to their owners. This is where you'll see the printing press come into play. Enraged by Reuchlin and the emperor's behavior, Pfefferkorn and his supporters publish pamphlets attacking Reuchlin. Reuchlin and his supporters reply with pamphlets of their own. And before long, you've got dozens and hundreds of pamphlets being printed, each attacking the other with passion and venom. It's like reading the comments after an internet news report. All right. I don't know about you. I've stopped reading all those comments. It just makes me sick to my stomach. All right. But this is the first example. And the printing press enables this. Before this, that's not a possibility. So how does it play out? 1540, the Dominican friars at the University of Cologne try to end the controversy by charging Reuchlin with the crime of Judaizing. Okay? He's guilty because he supports the support of books. Ultimately, in 1520, Pope Leo finds Reuchlin guilty and condemns him to silence. He could no longer participate in the public debate, and he dies 2 years later. You might have heard of the next character, Martin Luther. Martin Luther is operating during this same time frame. So if you remember, 1520 is when Reuchlin is ordered to silence. In 1517, 3 years before that, Martin Luther, a young professor at the University of Wittenberg, nails 95 arguments to his church door. The primary issue he was concerned with was the sale of indulgences. In other words, people could buy their forgiveness by donating money to the church. Leo, the Pope, needed the money. He wanted to renovate St. Peter's Cathedral in Rome, and he sold indulgences. You know, you murdered someone, now that'll cost you $20, whatever the cost is. All right, you could buy your way out. Luther thought this, and probably quite rightly, that it was in turning God's forgiveness into an object that could be bought and sold. And for him, this practice is contrary to the spirit of the Bible, which for him has ultimate authority. Ultimate authority comes not for Luther from the Pope or priests, but from the text itself. All right. You may see some parallels here to the Karaites, who would say ultimate authority comes not from the rabbis and the Talmud, but from the Bible. Now, the power of the printing press probably saved Luther's life, because he was not the first Christian to call for reforms in the church. 100 years later, a gentleman by the name of Jan Hus, H-U-S, was a priest from Prague and an early reformer. And when he put the same ideas out there, he was burned as a heretic in 1415. The reality of it is, because of the printing press, by 1520, more than 500,000 copies of Luther's requests were in writing and sold. It was so widely known that the Pope and other religious leaders were reluctant to deal with him in the same way they did with his predecessor 100 years before. That doesn't mean they were accepting of all this. In 1520, the same year that Reuchlin was silenced, Leo X issues a bull condemning Luther's books and speeches as heresy. And when he refuses to recant, he's excommunicated the next year. So the Pope's in good, he's just going off and excommunicating and taking care of things, silencing people. So that's the religious world. Let's talk a little bit about the civil world with Luther. Emperor Charles V, it's not quite as divided as I'm presenting it, because they were also serious Christians, okay? The new head of the Holy Roman Empire also sees Luther as a threat. He's troubled by the fact that Luther is claiming the Bible is the ultimate authority, not the Pope. And if the people could ignore the orders of a Pope, they certainly could ignore the orders of an emperor. And so in 1521, he invites Luther to Worms to meet with a powerful assembly of princes, and they urge Luther to recant. So the Pope tries it in 20 and the emperor in 21. Luther responds, "Unless I am convinced by the testimony of Scripture or by clear reason, I cannot and will not recant anything, for it is neither safe nor honest to act against one's conscience." What is the response? The assembly declares Luther an outlaw. So now you've got the Pope excommunicating him, the civil leadership declaring him an outlaw, but it doesn't stop Luther, and he's unable to go forward because everything is in writing and his popularity is exploding. Right. You see the power of the printing press in its early stages. So let's look at Luther and the Jews now. All right. Hoping that the Jews will convert, he declares that both he and the Jews have suffered from Catholic bigotry. He writes that it's the Catholic clergy, not the Jews, who are the ones who profane the Eucharist, the wafer. In 1523, Luther publishes a pamphlet entitled "That Jesus Christ Was Born a Jew." It was a response to the Catholic attacks on his ideas, and in his essay, he condemns the way that the church has treated the Jews. Gina, do you have the materials? Okay. Lisa, do you have them? Would you read reading number 1? Were people taught to read You know what? First of all, Lisa, hold on. You're muted. Lisa, you're muted. And Roz, I honestly don't know. Still think most of the population was illiterate, but all you needed was one person in the community to read it, and you could share it.
Which Lisa? Me?
You.
Tremarky?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
yes.
Sorry, I thought you were meaning another one.
Okay.
If I had been a Jew and had seen such idiots and blockheads ruling and teaching the Christian religion, I would sooner have become a pig than a Christian. I would advise and beg everybody to deal kindly with the Jews and to instruct them in the scriptures. In such a case, we could expect them to come over to us. If, however, we use brute force and slander them, saying that they need the blood of Christians to get rid of their stench, and I know not what other nonsense of that kind, and treat them like dogs, what good can we expect of them? Finally, how can we expect them to improve if we forbid them to work among us and to have social intercourse with us, and so force them into usury? If we wish to make them better, we must deal with them not according to the law of the Pope, but according to the law of Christian charity. We must receive them kindly and allow them to compete with us in earning a livelihood, so that they may have a good reason to be with us and among us, and an opportunity to witness Christian life and doctrine. And if some remain obstinate, what of it? Not every one of us is a good Christian.
Okay, hold on, Sarah. Okay, so have you heard these kinds of words before? It sounds like Muhammad. All right, in his early stages. By the way, it's the same argument used by Jews for Jesus. If only we will share our love instead of attacking, they will come to us. All right. Many readers in the Jewish world of the time were surprised by the final lines of the essay. It's an astonishing degree of religious tolerance at the time. And Jews may not have liked the Pauline doctrine of salvation by faith alone. They certainly welcomed the split in the Christian world. Right? If you're in Israel, what's the best that can happen around you? That your neighbors are all fighting with one another. God forbid they ever come together. All right? The Jews welcome this split. No doubt, Luther knew that his call for a change in Christian attitudes would towards the Jews would be used by his opponents to attack him. His Catholic enemies branded him a half Jew. Others said he was really a converted Jew, but his enemies were wrong. Luther was not trying to Judaize Christians, but rather to Christianize Jews. He viewed toleration as little more than enduring Jews until they became Christians. All right, Sarah, I think that kind of answers your question. Like Muhammad, he courted the Jews as he founded his new faith, confident that if you could get rid of the Christianity, that the popery and the mockery and all the buildings on that have happened since its founding, then Jews would be won to the gospel in its pure and primitive form. Many German peasants really are inspired by Luther's teachings about the importance of liberty. He talks about liberty and of following one's conscience and of reason. A chronicler of the time wrote, calling upon the Gospels as their justification, the common folk rose against their lords in protest against the injustices, the taxes, the burdens, and the general oppression under which they were forced to live. But they were missing Luther's point. Luther, when he's writing about freedom, is talking about religious freedom. He is not talking about political and social liberty. He is not looking to overturn the social structure of society, which he believed was ordained by God. If you were poor, that was God's decision. If you were wealthy, that's God's decision. On the far right in our political world today, there are those certainly who believe that as well. The far right, it's an extreme, and I want to make that point. So now you've got Christians, Catholics, and Protestants at war. It is impossible for the Jews to live in a society where the war is going on in their backyard to not take sides. And yet neither side is particularly sympathetic to the Jews. Luther really wants to convert them. Charles, the emperor, had renewed their charter, but in many cases had expelled many Jews. In the end, how does this play? Most Jews decide to support Charles because of a willingness to protect their rights in exchange for help and loyalty. Luther obviously is furious. He also finds out, thank you, printing press, Jews are disseminating their own religious literature among Christians, some of whom have converted to Christianity. Converted to Judaism. And by 1537, Luther is disappointed and convinced that most Jews have no intention of converting to Christianity, and if conversion's not a possibility, there's no reason to tolerate Jews. Sound like Muhammad? All right. In 1542, 3 years prior to his death, Luther publishes a new essay. All right. The new essay is called Concerning the Jews and Their Lies. All right. So we're going to need a couple readers here. Nomi, Gail, Gail, do you have it? All right. Lori, do you have it? Gloria, do you have it? All right. So let's split it up in 3 ways. Gail, would you start, and then Gloria, and then Lori?
I do not propose to convert the Jews, for that is impossible. They have failed to learn any lesson from the terrible distress that has been theirs for over 1400 years in exile, nor can they obtain an end or definite terminus of his. God's wrath is proof that the Jews surely rejected by God are no longer his people, and neither is he any longer their God. The entire course of the history of Israel and Judah is pervaded by blasphemy of God's word, by persecution, derision, and murder of the prophets. Judging them by history, these people must be called wanton murderers of the prophets and enemies of God's word. Whoever reads the Bible cannot draw any other conclusion. So it became apparent that they were a defiled bride, yes, an incorrigible whore, and an evil slut with whom God ever had to wrangle, scuffle, and fight. The wicked Jews cannot be God's people in their lineage. Circumcision and law of Moses cannot help them.
This is not a fan. All right. Gloria, would you continue?
Okay. The devil with all his angels has taken possession of this people. God often wanted to exterminate them, but Moses interceded for them. They are like the devil, who knows very well that God's word is truth, and yet with deliberate malice contradicts and blasphemes it. What shall we Christians do with this rejected and condemned people, the Jews? Since they live among us, we dare not tolerate their conduct, now that we are aware of their lying and blaspheming. If we do, we become sharers in their lies, cursing and blasphemy. Thus we cannot extinguish the unquenchable fire of divine wrath, of which the prophets speak, nor can we convert the Jews. With prayer and the fear of God, we must practice a sharp mercy to see whether we might save at least a few from the glowing flames. We care not avenge ourselves. Vengeance 1,000 times worse than we could wish them already has them by the throat. I shall give you, the princes and civil powers, my sincere advice.
All right. Lori, would you take us home on this one?
First, their synagogues or churches should be set on fire, and whatever does not burn up should be covered or spread over with dirt, so that no one may ever be able to see a cinder or a stone of it. Secondly, their homes should likewise be broken down and destroyed, for they perpetuate the same things there that they do in the synagogues. Thirdly, they should be deprived of their prayer books and Talmud in which such idolatry, lies, cursing, and blasphemy are taught. Fourthly, their rabbis must be forbidden under the threat of death to teach anymore. Fifthly, traveling privileges should be absolutely forbidden to the Jews. Let them stay at home. Sixthly, they ought to be stopped from usury. All their cash and valuables of silver and gold ought to be taken from them and put aside for safekeeping. Seventhly, let the young and strong Jews and Jewesses be given the flail, the axe, the hoe, the spade, the distaff, the spindle, and let them earn their bread, as is enjoined upon Adam's children. If, however, we are afraid that they might harm us personally or our wives, children, servants, cattle, etc., when they serve us or work for us, then let us apply the same cleverness, expulsion, as the other nations such as France, Spain, Bohemia, etc., and settle with them for that which they have extorted usurously from us, and after having divided it up fairly, let us drive them out of the country for all time. Rulers and clergy must act like a good physician who, when gangrene has set in, proceeds without mercy to cut, saw, and burn flesh, veins, bone, and marrow. Such a procedure must be followed in this instance.
Yeah, I mean, basically, we've been labeled a cancer to be excised. 2 years later, 1544, Luther stirs up further controversy with a sermon entitled Admonition Against the Jews. He repeats all of the old libels against the Jews: ritual murder, poisoning of the wells, and black magic. This is a man who's gone out. Remember, this is the one who was preaching love, 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 and they'll come to us, right? When they don't, he builds it into the formative texts, just like Paul did, just like Muhammad did. And these writings of Luther would continue to shape opinions for hundreds of years. In the 1930s and 40s, right, 400 years after they were written, Hitler and the Nazi Party would quote Luther as proof of how evil and dangerous the Jews were. In his book, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, William Shirer writes the following: "It is difficult to understand the behavior of most German Protestants in the first Nazi years, unless one is aware of two things: their history and the influence of Martin Luther. The great founder of Protestantism was both a passionate anti-Semite and a ferocious believer in absolute obedience to political authority. He wanted Germany rid of the Jews. Luther's advice was literally followed 4 centuries later by Hitler, Goering, and Himmler." So when you ask, how is it the Christians of Germany stood by, you have the words of Martin Luther as your source. Now, I don't want to leave it there because I think I want to take an aside here because I think it's extremely important. Lutheran churches in the last 50 years have repudiated this anti-Semitic belief of Martin Luther. I want to emphasize that, okay? A 1970 survey of almost 4,800 North American Lutherans in the age of 15 and 65, compared with other minority groups, found that Lutherans were among the least prejudiced towards Jews. Since the 1980s, some Lutheran churches have formally denounced and dissociated themselves from Luther's writings on the Jews. In '82, the Lutheran World Federation issued a consultation stating the following: "We Christians must purge ourselves of any hatred of the Jews and any sort of teaching in contempt of Judaism." In '98, it keeps going, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America endorsed the declaration to the Jewish community, which repudiates anti-Jewish writings of Luther and expresses a desire to respect and understand Judaism and even to love the Jews. And finally, in 2004, there's a panel on Lutheran Jewish relations which issues a statement urging any Lutheran church that is presenting a passion play to adhere to their guidelines. So despite this anti-Semitism within Luther's writings, I didn't want to leave it there. I really feel it's important that you walk away not assuming that Lutheran churches, therefore, to the contrary, they have repudiated much of his statements about anti-Semitism. And you find that in a number of churches around it. You know, I again remember reading a number of the writings by Jews by the responses to Jews for Jesus, and they'll point out, you know, yeah, the Southern fundamentalists want you converted. There's no question about it. But at the same time, you want to know where the local synagogue is? Ask a Catholic priest; he'll tell you. Yeah, exactly. All right. And so one has to distinguish and not make large generalizations. And certainly, please don't make that generalization to include the Lutherans, because right now, that's not where they stand.
And when did that start, Cantor?
It started sometime, it probably began in response to the 1960s Catholic Church and the Pope.
Okay, I was curious because when we were in Dallas, when we were in high school, we visited different churches from religious education, you know, interfaith, and I thought of course, these kids would now have been, you know, teens because it was high school.
Right.
And I remember going to one of all the places we visited, the kids just, you know, we could talk with each other and everything else until you hit that if you don't believe in Christ, you're going to hell.
Right. Well, let me distinguish here. Time out. And then I do want to go on. Let me distinguish between respecting the Jews does not mean necessarily one would may or may not reject that the philosophy that if you don't believe in Jesus, you're going to hell. Those are two separate things. Okay.
I think that was the statement.
All right. So I've described what's going on in the Protestant world. Let's go back to the Catholic world, okay, a little bit. By the 1540s, the Pope has to deal with the fact that there is this uprising. There is a protesting that is going on. There are calls for reform. It goes beyond Luther and a few preachers. It's now dividing countries, one after another. By 1545, Pope Paul III calls for an assembly in Trent. Most Protestants refuse to attend, and because they no longer see themselves part of the Catholic Church, and even if they do attend, they're not allowed to vote. So it's not an embracing, warm environment. Nonetheless, the council calls for significant reforms, and in particularly the elimination of the abuses that Luther had highlighted, the sale of indulgences. The council does not spend a lot of attention on the Jews. Its main focus is emphasis on heresy within the church, but the Jews were the focus of at least one statement. In response to who killed Jesus, Catholic leaders at the Council of Trent in 1551 wrote reading number 3. Sarah, do you have that?
Reading number 3. Okay. In the guilt of the crucifixion are involved all those who frequently fell into sin. For as our sins consigned Christ to death on the cross, most certainly those who wallow in sin and iniquity themselves crucify against the Son of God. This guilt seems more enormous in us than in the Jews, since according to the testimony of the apostle, if they had known, they would never have crucified the Lord of glory, while we, on the contrary, professing to know him, yet denying him by our actions, seem in some sort to lay violent hands on him.
This is an unbelievable text for 1551. In other words, the church is saying Jesus was crucified for the sins of all people, especially Christians, not because of the sins of the Jews. This is 1960 Pope, many years before. If this idea, this understanding of the crucifixion had been widely preached and taught, history, particularly the history of anti-Semitism, might have been very different. But at the time, the myth of Jews as Christ killers was so powerful, even in a world of the printing press. That idea continued to inform the way both Catholics and Protestants, the masses, perceived Jews. For whatever reason, few people knew of the statement made at the Council of Trent until the 1960s, when the Catholic Church once again considered reform. Fascinating. 1551. All right, so let me not suggest, despite that the Jews are now the beloved of the leadership in the Christian world, because they're not. Even as the Council of Trent debates reforms, the Pope and the church leaders are trying to stamp out all forms of heresy, and that is directed not only at the Protestants, but at conversos and at Jews. All Jews who had converted to Christianity, not just the ones forcibly baptized, were now being viewed with suspicion. And in 1549, you have published for the first time an index of forbidden books. Books believed that would contaminate or corrupt the morals of Roman Catholics. And by the way, this included not just religious texts, but also scientific texts, the works of Galileo, and Copernicus. I guess science is your fake news of the time. And by the 1550s, popes were not willing to protect the Jews as they had done earlier. By 1553, a Franciscan friar who had converted to Judaism was burned at the stake in Rome. All right. The Talmud was being considered disrespectful and ordered to be burned. All right. And this continues to go on. In 1555, the new Pope, Paul IV, issues, going even further, and issues a bull in which he states, Sandy, would you read reading number 4 for us?
It is absurd and inconvenient that the Jews, who through their own fault were condemned by God to eternal slavery, can show such ingratitude toward Christians and affront them by asking for their mercy. They have become so bold as to not only live amongst Christians, but near their churches without any distinctive clothing.
Okay. So here you have the call for distinctive clothing. Here you have the confining to ghettos, where Jews are now required to live by law. If Jews have property, they need to sell it to Christians. They could not employ Christian servants. They needed to wear distinctive clothing, yellow hats for men, yellow scarves for women. All synagogues but one are to be destroyed. Jews are barred again from professions and forbidden to own real estate. Jewish physicians are forbidden to treat Christians. They could leave the ghetto during the day, but had to return at night, at which point from sunset to sunrise, the ghetto would be locked. There were guards installed by the Christians, and the Jews had to pay the fees to enable the locking. This is a ghettoization. I want to talk about that word just for a second. There's two traditional sources of the word ghetto. The first one is likely, the second one is midrash at its best. All right, so the first ghetto established in Venice was located next to a cannon factory and was designated with the Italian word for factory, ghetto. Okay, that is the likely truth. Now let me give you some midrash. Some suggest that the word ghetto comes from the Hebrew word get, meaning divorce, and that ghettoization is the separating and divorcing of the Jews from the general population. Love it, cute, adorable. I'm not buying it. The expulsion from Spain had triggered the idea that Jews should not be able to live in a Christian country. That's the idea. You have all these expulsions going on, while Christian merchants and artisans want to eliminate their Jewish competitors. All right, we've talked about this over and over. Oftentimes, however, the government officials see the Jews as a source of income and don't wish to expel them. So you have the population saying, we don't want to live amongst them. You've got the leadership saying they bring us income. What's the compromise? Put them into a ghetto. That was the compromise. It was the non-expulsion outcome. Now, the ghetto is not an entirely new experience. Jewish quarters, the idea that Jews would live together as well, you know, I mean, in Houston, we have our Jewish quarters too, you know, the Jewish row. Every city in America, we tend to find one another like any other population with parallels. You know, I would say to you, a lot of, for example, at Brit Shalom, we have a very significant Latino Jewish community. They seem that community seems to have found one another at Brit Shalom. Okay, good. That's a tendency. The difference is it's not legally imposed. All right, it is not an incarceration. And what's happening here is for the first time an incarceration where you don't have an option and you're being locked away for the first time. At the same time, not all Jews were so totally against this. It was looked upon sometimes as a privilege. And in some Italian Jewish communities, it was actually celebrated. The establishment of the ghetto became an annual festival in the 18th and 19th centuries. And as the ghetto died, many rabbis rued its disappearance. Patterns of, let's talk about the ghetto a little bit. Patterns varied, but usually the ghetto was in the poorest part of town, enclosed by walls, guarded at night, and all of this paid for by the Jews. It was incredibly overcrowded, usually a street of abnormally tall houses. Okay, now think about the significance of this. We're talking about a world of tall homes, which is not a great idea in a world in which you don't have modern sewage. Okay, I described at Shavuot a community in which they often took their refuse and threw it out the window. That was Rome. You also have high density populations in a world in which plagues and fire strike regularly. So now you've got COVID running around in a highly densely populated community. That's the parallel. All of us retreat to our homes. The ghetto of Rome, as an example, had as many as 10,000 inhabitants in less than a square mile. And the one in Frankfurt had 4,000 people in 190 homes, or more than 20 people per home. We're talking about high density living and intense poverty. Now, from a Jewish lens, as I started out by saying before, not all of this, I'm not going to tell you it was good, but not all of this is bad. It fosters an ethnic solidarity. It fosters attachment to the synagogue. It fosters a devotion to study. All right. What you've got is a world in which it is so tough in certain ways, people turn inward. That's the world from which mystics emerge. This is the world in which Hasidism emerges. Abraham Joshua Heschel calls these years the golden period of Jewish history in the history of the Jewish soul. Not at the same time, he's also noting Jews were more scholarly, but they are now for the first time closed off from the outer influences of the learning going on in the world. And so although Jews become far more knowledgeable about Judaism, the width, the breadth of knowledge is for the first time very narrow. They're not exposed to the larger pieces of the world. I haven't stopped and asked for questions. And anything anybody wants to ask?
A comment. Go ahead, please.
Sorry, mysticism and what else?
Hasidism. Yeah. All right, Sandy, and then Sarah.
Yeah, yeah. The comment. We were last year. We were in both the Venice and the Roman ghettos. The ghetto really is hardly exists. The old Venice ghetto still existed. I happened to be put on a kippah before entering, and I was accosted by the Chabad to lay tefillin. They were not very happy when I turned them down 3 times. Because it's very crowded, and because there was a limit to only one synagogue, what they did is they kept building different synagogues on top of each other, so that you had, it's like your landsman had this for the first floor, and the second floor was a different group of landsmen. Some of them look pretty nice, but it's clear there's not very many Jews left. The ghetto is well preserved. It was very interesting. In Rome, the only thing that we saw of interest was the Great Synagogue, which really is amazingly beautiful.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Sarah?
Yeah, were the ghettos around in the 1700s? Because I thought Hasidism was later, unless you talk about piety.
Well, yeah, the answer is yes. And Hasidism had started earlier. Mysticism had started, but Hasidism as an outgrowth is really growing during this period. You're finding its seeds here. Okay. So, but this point, what you've got is a Catholic and a Protestant world that is at each other's throats. Compromises are no longer working. By 1552, Charles V had become so disillusioned by what's going on that he retires from the emperor's position and goes to a monastery and turns the empire over to his brother Ferdinand. Each of the Christians, the Catholics and the Protestants, are so busy vying with one another to be more pious than the other. And one of the ways in which that evidences is through treatment of Jews. I can be more pious if I can be more hateful. Right? We know this search for piety in this competition. I don't know, I have a friend I grew up with who became a chassid in Muncie. And she has described for me how, which hat you're wearing and how long your coat is. And your rabbi is not religious enough. Your Hasidic rabbi is not religious enough for me. I have a longer coat. I have a bigger hat. I have a whatever it is. Okay. This vying for I can be more pious than you. In 1555, an agreement is finally reached in which each prince of each principality is able to determine what church would be the official church of the state. All right. This is the first acknowledgement by the church that there can be more than one source of religious authority. And it's a step in the direction of toleration. Although many of the Jews in Germany and Scandinavia remain Lutherans, you start to see the emergence of other leaders as well. You start, for example, John Calvin, a French lawyer who becomes a Protestant in the 1530s. And from there, you start to see quarrels that emerge among these groups and holy wars that go on from 1550 to 1648, the 100-Year War. They're more than religious wars. They're struggles for political domination of the Holy Roman Empire. And each group initially is intolerant of letting the others live amongst them. Calvinists in particular experience persecution and exile, and they find it increasingly difficult to interpret Jewish misfortunes as an expression of God's wrath. They identify with it. And some now, the Calvinists, some of them now begin to identify with the Israelites of the Hebrew scriptures And imagine a covenant being made that includes both Calvinists and Jews. And this view spreads by way of France to the Netherlands and to England and to Scotland and eventually to North America. They have a lot of the Dutch rule. All right. And if you study American history, when the first Jews come from Recife to America, it is the Dutch rulership, Dutch leadership that is enabling that in many of the conflicts that happen. In 1556, the Netherlands, one of the most Protestant areas of Europe, is under the rule of the Catholic king of Spain. So you've got a Protestant area under the rule of a Catholic king. He organizes an inquisition and the Dutch revolt and a religious war begins. When it ends, the southern provinces of the Netherlands, all right, in other words, modern day Belgium, remain under Spanish rule and in the north, the Netherlands becomes a Protestant country. So you've got a country divided, what is Belgium today, and Netherlands north. South is Catholic, north is Protestant. And with this independence in the north comes a public clamor for a new right, the right to follow one's own religious beliefs, regardless of anybody else's. Now, I want to point out that Jewish refugees are flocking to America in the late 1600s, but they have few real rights until 1657, when the government of the United Netherlands demands that other nations recognize Dutch Jews as citizens of the Netherlands and therefore treat them accordingly. You're not going to attack our citizens. But understand, this toleration is a decision made by rulers. It's not a God-given right. Only a few people in the 1600s believed that it was God-given. Among them was an English minister named Roger Williams. Roger Williams immigrates to Britain's North American colonies in 1631, and he founds the colony of Rhode Island. And for him, mere toleration is not enough. He advocates total freedom of conscience and insists that it be extended to all. So there you've got the workings of how, in a sense, American concepts begin in terms of toleration and acceptance. By 1790, George Washington writes a letter to a Jewish congregation in Newport, Rhode Island, describing a new nation as giving, quote, bigotry no sanction and persecution no assistance. Clearly, Jews welcomed these words, and they considered a government willing to protect all of its citizens the best protection. That's where we're going to leave off today. That's actually a positive note. Again, I don't get to finish too many of these lessons on a positive. I'm feeling very good right now. I will take comments and questions.
Cantor, growing up in New York, you know, we learned New York history, which obviously first were the Dutch. And Peter Stuyvesant was very much against giving rights and allowing a synagogue and allowing Jews. But he was forced to do it, both by the Dutch government and by the East Indian.
Okay, right. Company. So what you've got, I would go up to Albany, New York, where my mom was born, and they had Stuyvesant Plaza. So I just grew up with Stuyvesant, not having any idea. When the Jews settle in
New Amsterdam.
Yeah, right. When they initially come, the first group settled in 1623. Peter Stuyvesant is the governor, and he had experienced before he came here some bad dealings economically with the Jews, and so he tried to prevent them from coming aboard. But essentially, the Dutch government, the Protestant Calvinist government, said no. They had a lot of positive dealings. There was influence of Jewish dollars in the process as well, and they overruled Stuyvesant to enable him to come into the country. All right. Anybody else? Yes. No.
Question. What period of time were the ghettos in action, in force? From when to when?
Well, certainly from the 1500s. I would guess through the 1800s.
Through the till the Enlightenment, or
No, beyond the Enlightenment.
okay.
This is all, yeah, absolutely beyond the Enlightenment. I mean, there were ghettos, in the early 1800s for sure.
Didn't Napoleon open the ghettos?
Yeah, but, so in certain countries, yes.
Yeah.
Right. So in other words, there are places where indeed it ends earlier, but certain things just continue on no matter what's going on in the rest of the world. So as an example, the Inquisition wasn't formally eliminated in Spain until the 1980s. Doesn't mean it was going on, but it takes different amounts of time in different locations.
I'd like to say something. Can you hear me?
We can, please.
Okay. One of the books that I read that was called The Conversos was brought up in Herald Voice by, I can't remember his name, the gentleman who does all the reviews.
Aaron?
Yeah.
And it was fascinating. And it was right at that period, at the 1550s, because they were just talking about the printing press coming out and what was going on. Secondly, you mentioned the ghetto. My grandmother left the United States after becoming an American citizen back to Romania, because even though it was not a prescribed ghetto, it was one. She could practice her Judaism, and she was extremely religious, fearful religious. She left New York, where my father was born, and her other children were living with them, the family. The whole family went back to Romania so she could be a real Jew in that area that she lived in.
Right. The reality is that, one of the reasons so many Jews didn't leave Europe.
Right, exactly.
Is because the rabbis forbid them to come to America. America was the place of Goyim. America was a place of the death of Jewish living.
That's right.
America was the place of a liberal Judaism. And so many Jews stayed there. And I can understand what you're describing. Those who came here may have found it to be intolerable.
Yeah, well, he eventually opened up a little store, and in order to make a living, he had to keep it open on the Sabbath.
Yeah.
That was forbidden to her.
Right. My great-grandfather did the same thing. He opened up a store so that he could pay to bring the rest of the family over. And he worked on Shabbos because from his perspective, it was life-saving.
The third thing I want to mention, if you don't mind.
Please.
I was born and raised in Bucharest, Romania. And despite the fact that you mentioned all of the viewpoints of allowing the Jews to not to blaming the Jews for Christ, I remember coming home from school and being followed by kids who kept calling me a Christ killer. That was ingrained in them. And
yeah,
I want to mention also, I was a guide at the Holocaust Museum, and in my talking and showing a picture of Torah and several other of the Jewish items that were seen there, I also mentioned the fact that they ought to read another book called Rome, A Biography of a City, to show how they killed their criminals, or whatever they call it, by cross.
Right.
That's a Roman thing, not a Jewish thing.
Right.
The Jewish Bible. Do you ever find anything like that?
No, there's no mention of crucifixion. Is not a Jewish behavior. Jews stoned. Jews stoned.
That's exactly what I was trying to tell them.
Right.
That is not. Maybe they used stones. Maybe they used other means.
All right. So Rosina, I first of all, thank you. All right. I want to point out that what you've highlighted is oftentimes, and I've mentioned this a few times, oftentimes the leadership of a community, whether it be a nation or a smaller segment, often was in favor of giving Jews privileges. That didn't mean that the people within those communities were open to it. And so in Romania, it may have been that there was an official policy, did not mean that you did not experience from the masses terrible anti-Semitism.
Exactly. Well,
Yeah.
especially in certain areas, however.
Right. Well, look, that's true. And it's true here in America as well. I mean, as a Jew, at one point, I drove through Alabama and Mississippi about 30 years ago. I was terrified to break down, to have my car break down. It's not a place that I'd walk around with a kippah in a country in which we have religious freedom.
I went to Texas Women's University, and I had a friend I made who was from West Texas, from a little town. And I was the first Jew she'd ever met. And, you know, she probably thought I would have horns.
Right.
Because that's how she grew up.
Right. So the behavior of the masses doesn't necessarily reflect what the government official policy is. That's a distinction we've been making over and over throughout this course, and I think it's important. Thank you for highlighting it. Anybody else? Sarah?
No, I was going to
Jeff?
add, that I actually had that experience in the 60s, being chased home from kindergarten by children throwing stones, yelling Christ killer. And that was in New York City, where there are plenty of Jews living around me. It's just something that's a
Yeah, I
sad
lived
thing.
in
to
Rockland
think
County
of.
as a cantor, walking home and wearing a kippah from Shabbat services, had somebody open a window in their car as they went past and throw out a can of transmission fluid and hit me in the face.
Oh,
Yeah, we all have these. I don't think I'm unique. All right, Jeff?
Where's Jeff?
Can't hear you, Jeff.
Where are you, Jeff?
Hear you, Jeff.
I see you and you're unmuted and I can't hear you.
Well, if I may say one more thing, I want to say thank you so much for offering this. I live in Austin now. I don't
There he is.
of the synagogue near me. I cannot drive to one. I cannot be part of the community that I miss terribly. And so thank you for doing these things.
You're very welcome, Rosine. Keep coming back. We have lots of classes and lots of opportunities. Delighted to see you. I remember now that you had moved to Austin, and it's wonderful to see you.
2 years ago, and I have not stopped missing Bris Shalom and the Holocaust Museum and the friends like Sandy and his wonderful wife, Leslie, who's been so good to me.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. You know, in our world of COVID, we don't see each other at all, realistically. So no one's sure where anybody is at this point. So it's good to have you pop in and visit. Please come back every week. We'll be here again next Sunday, and then we're taking 2 weeks off. All
So
right.
January 3rd, we will have a class.
No,
Sunday is
hold on.
January 3rd.
No, it's
Oh, that'd be the 10th.
31st.
Oh.
No. January 1st is New Year.
It's the the morning of next. Oh wait, hold it. Wait. Let me just make sure I've got this right. We're off on. No, I'm wrong. No.
No, you are.
I am wrong. This is the
Yeah.
last Sunday. I'm
I have
wrong.
down our next class is January 17th at 10 o'clock.
You're right. My apologies. I'm losing track of time here as we're going.
So
Are we now on it changing to 10 a.m.?
That's the other key fact. Yes, because we've got so much going on at the synagogue. We're going back to 10 a.m. The next time we meet on the 17th. The number of sisterhood programs. This enables people to do both, and we want to encourage as much participation. So the 17th, thank you, is the next class. We have a couple of weeks off, so I wish everybody a happy New Year.
what about
The
the
safe one.
Thursday?
Thank you, Cantor.
What
What's
about
that?
what about your Thursday one?
Hold on, something's not right. Hold on one second. 31st.
That's a Thursday.
I'm wrong. No. Jack, wait. So today's the 27th. So next week is the 4th. No, I'm right.
Third.
The 10th. Right, that's correct. We are off for 2 more weeks. The next, let me clear. Good. I've lost track of time.
That's for the Thursday one too? No?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Thursday. We are done with Thursdays until the 21st.
Okay.
And this will be announced.
Okay, so I walked out. The next one is
January 17th, 10 o'clock.
Okay.
Right.
But
This class replaced, I was going to take this week off, but I am taking a course myself in January. So this class replaced that.
Oh, thank you.
That's what I was confused about last week. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I apologize for the confusion. Well, again, man plans and God laughs.
Yeah.
It's really good to see you,
Bye.
Rosine.
Yeah.
Happy
We
New
missed
Year,
you.
Well,
everybody.
thank
Thank
you.
you. Happy New Year, everybody. Thank
Happy
you.
New Year.
Happy
Be
New
safe.
Year.
Be safe, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Bye.
Stay well. Be well.
Yeah, okay. Hello,